It happened, and I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. But I don't regret it. I haven't felt so alive in a long time. Oh, man, I did it again. I've put the cart before the horse and given you the conclusion without any background. Angela and I have been married 17 years. We're still in love, and I had never been unfaithful to her. Now, that's not to say that I don't like to look at women. I mean, what man doesn't? To be honest, every now and then, I even flirt a little. And that is where our neighbor and Angela's best friend Lisa enters the picture. These two are like sisters and are pretty much joined at the hip. The moment they met, they developed a deep connection, and because they are so close, over the years, our families have spent a lot of time together. Now Lisa's husband Jim was a little different. He was one of the most negative people I have ever met. He hated the government. He hated paying taxes. He hated his job. He pretty much hated everything. He was always contrary. The glass was always half empty with him, and never half full. And one day Jim just went AWOL and left, leaving Lisa and her children without a father. It was sad to watch, but it was their reality. Over the years, what was left of our two families watched the kids grow up, and I especially watched a young girl grow into a woman. Who is the girl who is now a full-blown woman? Emily, Lisa's oldest daughter. Young Emily had blossomed into a 20-year-old woman right before my eyes. We spoke all of the time. I've met several of her boyfriends, helped with schoolwork, and taught her to drive. With an absentee dad, I became the male figure in her life, providing guidance, counsel, and advice on numerous occasions. Last summer, I spent a lot of time with Emily, tutoring her in clinical social work, a sore subject for her in her sophomore year at State. Involved in this was a great deal of role-playing, and we bantered about several scenarios, play-acting our way through various problems and such. It was in one of these scenarios I, as a subject, mentioned that my fictitious wife and I were having various troubles in the bedroom. It started as a real topic from her workbook, but soon I started pushing the envelope by entering some details of my own marriage to make it interesting. And yes, it was a little flirty conversation too, as my young counselor, Emily, went with the flow, eliciting private data from me under the guise of background. It started as innocent fun, but after a bit I stretched the envelope by adding risque details. I mentioned that Angela, the fictitious Jessica, my pretend wife, hasn't used her mouth on me in 5 years. Her excuse was that she didn't think it was proper or womanly. Of course, when we were dating, and through the first couple years of marriage, Angela was very affectionate toward me, but over time this changed. I explained all of this to Emily, my budding young counselor, of course masking my real world under the guise of being a disgruntled husband seeking help. Dr. Jones, as I called her, was a sympathizing listener. Emily listened and nodded appropriately. I wondered what was going through her mind, as she obviously read past my story and knew it was really me and my life I was describing. Nevertheless, like any good psychologist, she took notes, asked a few penetrating questions, then looked at her watch and said we'd pick up the conversation at our next session. Over the next several role-playing sessions, which extended to most of the summer, more and more details were shared. It was extremely exhilarating talking to Emily about my marital life, all under the guise of helping her with schoolwork. I hated to see the sessions end when she went back to school, but received great news several months later when she aced her class and sent me a thank you note. During those months, nothing improved between me and Angela, but things took a turn for the worst for me professionally. I lost my job when my company went out of business and had to rely on Angela's father for financial assistance. Once I found a new job, things were still tight as the new position paid less than the last. That made things a little rough around the house, as Angela constantly reminded me how her dad had to help us along. Things didn't get better with me back in the work grind, as Angela began to question and comment on nearly everything we did. It was as if she blamed me for having to ask her father for help. And heck, I was repaying the man monthly even when he told me to forget about the loan. My love life with Angela became nearly non-existent, and I wasn't happy about it. I wanted more than a quickie for my birthday or anniversary, but I figured in time things would get back to normal. A few days before Christmas, I made my annual trip to the mall to pick up a few last-minute gifts. It was a long afternoon, hustling and bumping with the mob of shoppers, all with the same intentions as me. Passing Willard's, I noticed a mannequin dressed in a preppy pink blouse and short pleated skirt in the window. My mind drifted as I looked at the display. The outfit was hot, something I wish my wife would wear for me. It wasn't a proper outfit, and I knew it was only fantasy that she'd dress up for me, but it was a great thought. Lost in my thoughts, I looked again at the outfit, and this time I noticed a girl in the store looking at the same outfit. It was Emily. I don't know which of us was more surprised, but we both gave a sort of wave at each other. I stood as Emily came running out of the store and gave me a hug.
Oh, Mr. Smith, it's so good to see you. I was hoping to catch up with you over the Christmas break. I just got in last night. I was hoping that Mom would invite you guys over for dinner next week.
I invited her to Starbucks near the food court for a coffee and conversation so we could catch up. We talked about school, her classes, boyfriends, my new job, vacation plans, and other topics. From time to time, I couldn't help but stare at the beautiful girl sitting across the table from me. She said,
You know, I just have to thank you again for all your help with my clinical social work class. There's no doubt in my mind you helped me get in a. When I did role-playing in class, I just imagined it was you I was speaking with and it was a breeze, said the gleeful girl. There would be some beak across from me asking questions, and I'd imagine your soothing smile on his face. I know all your work helped me.
Of course, I told her she did all the work, that I didn't take any of the tests, and that she earned her grade. Minutes turned into an hour, and I wondered where the time went. We walked through the mall. She helped me purchase a couple gifts for my wife, and then asked if she could bum a ride home with me. Walking toward my car, and totally out of left field, Emily began to laugh. What's so funny? I questioned. Nothing, Mr. Smith, she said, using my fake name from our role-playing sessions. Then she asked, have you been getting more intimate with your wife, Jessica? I had to laugh. I shook my head, opening the car door and gazing at the long legs of the pretty girl, then stepped around to the driver's side. Inside, I looked at the young woman, rolled my eyes, and replied, no, Mrs. Smith and I aren't having, well, intimate relations in any way. The young 20-year-old college girl smiled as she gazed into my eyes. Why, Mr. Smith, no relations at all? You mean you aren't engaging in any kind of intimacy? She asked in a clinical manner. I shook my head no. That's quite sad. She moved closer and slipped her hand on mine. That's very sad, especially because you are such a nice, caring man. Her naughty talk sparked a heat wave in me. Emily removed her hand, but not before gazing at my obvious.
I've learned a lot in school. As she changed the topic, it has been a lot of hard work and a lot of late-night studying.
I merely nodded, noticing once more how pretty she was sitting across from me. I dreamily thought of her accidental touch, and how I'd love to be touched again. Clearly, Emily would be the main attraction that night during my personal stress-relieving session. Her voice snapped me back to reality.
You know, I learned a lot this semester not only about clinical social work, but also math, English, and even study techniques. But I think my favorite course was in social studies. We talked a lot about embarrassing subjects, like relationships and, well, intimacy. You can imagine how embarrassing it is to talk intimacy in front of the guys.
Well, not really, Emily, but maybe for me in front of a woman, like you.
Are you embarrassed now? She asked.
Yep. She looked out the window, back at me, and smiled once again.
No need to be. This is like, well, a counseling session. It's private, confidential, and nobody will know we talked.
Well, the beautiful young lady looked at me, smiled, and then continued.
I did have some time for fun in school, a little time for experimentation.
She stopped talking for a minute. I merely looked at her.
Know what I learned?
Nope.
Let me show you.
With that, the beautiful young woman reached over and touched me.
Mr. Smith, I learned to do this.
I was heaven. She made me feel like I hadn't felt for years.
Mr. Smith, don't you think this is a little too out in the open? Anyone could walk up to the car and see us, and I have a reputation to protect. I had to agree, as we were in a parking garage merely steps from the elevator and several other cars.
Starting the car, I down another level, circling before finding a secluded spot farthest away from the elevator where I could look in the rear view and side mirrors for intruders. Throughout the drive, Emily gave me attention. Turning the car off and setting the mirrors, I looked once again at the pretty young thing. I couldn't believe it. She was half my age. Her smile was infectious, her legs a sight to behold. She was an attractive young lady. She now demanded my attention and requested to give me hers. I wasn't about to argue with or decline the request. I looked around, the coast seemed clear. I readied myself for nirvana, and I was not disappointed. I hadn't received attention like this in years. My eyes rolled in my head. Oh my God, I cried. I was on the brink and I demanded that Emily stop. She didn't.
That was incredible, Mr. Smith, she said.
I was on cloud nine, savoring the moment. Oh, Emily, I said, it was fantastic.
Mr. Smith, you don't know how good it felt for me.
We embraced, and I wanted her attention one more time, but she said,
I think we're pushing things if I were to give you my undivided attention here again. We don't want to be busted by security.
Man, I wanted her again, but she was right. We were lucky to have stayed away from prying eyes for so long. On the ride home, I held the wheel tight as Emily gave me her attention again. We made small talk as if nothing was happening. It felt so amazing. It was dark as we pulled into our development. Emily surprised me again by pointing to a parking lot near some baseball fields, instructing me to pull over. We found a secluded spot, and Emily wasted no time. I had never experienced anything like this. She was beautiful. She made me feel like I had never felt in my life. She told me I was wonderful and how much she enjoyed me, and I returned the compliment as I was now giving her my undivided attention. We both reached nirvana. I had never experienced anything like that. I started to speak, but she stopped me and said,
No talking. Let's just savor the moment. Let's not ruin things.
We held each other for a while. Then, I drove her home, dropped her off, and pulled next door into my driveway. I wasn't sure what she had meant by ruining things, but I do remember that during my private session that night, all I could think about was the attention she gave me earlier that day. During the break, I'd see her from time to time, attempted to be around when she was, but there was never an opening for me to approach her, nor did she make any attempt to privately contact me. We'd speak at dinners, smile special, knowing smiles, and act like father and daughter. I began to think it had been a dream, or, if reality, a one-day affair. A week after our get-together, and right before Emily was heading back to school, Angela and Lisa decided they needed a day at a local spa on a Saturday, and I resigned myself to do several honeydew projects around the house. Working in the basement, I was startled by a knock at the rear door. Looking around, I spotted Emily. She did not look pleased.
What did you tell your wife about us?
What? I stammered.
I'm grounded and you act like nothing is wrong.
I attempted to explain I had no idea of what she was talking about, but she told me to shut up. She put her hand on my head and pushed me to the floor.
If I'm going to be in this much trouble, it's going to be worth it.
I didn't know what to do. She gave me her undivided attention and demanded mine.
Give it to me now. Emily was emphatic. Now I said, now.
I thought of my wife, I thought of her mother, and I thought about what could happen if they came home right now. What would happen if anyone ever found out? At that moment, I didn't care. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop. We went to the mountain top together again. When we were finished, we embraced, but then, Emily abruptly got up, looked at me, smiled, and left. The next day she went back to school, and left me to deal with the ramifications of what I had done. I wish I could tell you that I feel bad, or that I wouldn't do it again. Well, if I did, I'd be lying. I'm looking forward to spring break, hoping that Emily will come home, and hoping that we'll get to spend time together again.